welcome back to Whiskey Uncut. I'm your host, Paul. Today, my co-host, James,
we did it this time. I like it.
Is also here, and we are doing our special end of the season episode, Best of 2022. So this is all going to be whiskeys that we tasted on the show, which is less than it was in season 1, but it's still quite a bit. I think there were about 60 whiskeys in the...
Yeah, I think the first year, though, didn't we have like 80?
Yeah, we had almost 100 in the first one, because I think we did like 22 episodes in season 1, and I think we were at like 17 episodes season 2, since you were traveling a lot and just schedules didn't line up.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is this will wrap up season 2. So the next time we start, we'll be starting fresh with the season 3.
Yep.
So does that mean are you going to do a new intro and all that kind of stuff? Like,
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know. It'll be like the same, but I'll probably grab some slightly different audio bites. We'll see. We'll see how much time I've got. Tyler claims, our producer Tyler, who rarely shows up anymore to the show.
I haven't seen Tyler in months.
He claims that he will be able to edit videos for us.
I like that you're putting pressure on him, though.
Which means, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Which means that videos should actually be able to, stay consistent if he actually does that, because I do them when I have time, but I very rarely have time.
And if he doesn't, we can give out his phone number over the podcast, and people can text him and
harass him.
Yeah. Make sure that he gets it up there.
First of all, before we get into this, I want to thank our patrons. So our producer, Lorraine Denisi, our drink along tier of Taylor Lauren. At Raise a Glass, we have Dana King. And then we have our Malt mates and Bourbon Bros, Greg Spencer, Harrison Hamill, Jacob Estrada, Jonathan Richardson, Ray Looney, and Corn Cake.
Nice.
And I want to thank all you guys for continuing to support us this past season and making the show possible, because there are definitely episodes and like some events and stuff that we're working on trying to do, like a whiskey cocktail event and stuff, that some of that Patreon money, paying for equipment and all that is taken care of, that we can start doing thanks to the Patreon stuff. So thank you guys very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. So what we're going to be doing for this episode is tasting whiskeys that have nothing to do with what we're talking about on the list, but are just some of our absolute favorite whiskeys.
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to start off with is Hibiki 21 years old.
Oh, we're starting big.
Yeah, this is probably the rarest bottle that I have by far. I bought this bottle back as my graduation present to myself, and then I waited to open it until the day I got married.
Ooh.
So, that was nice.
Oh, that was nice. You also opened up, didn't you also drink Blanton's straight from the barrel at your wedding?
That was for my bachelor party.
Bachelor party. Okay.
Yeah, lots of good whiskey involved around my...
whenever there's a celebratory thing for people like us, it tends to flow. Which, by the way, Hibiki has some of the nicest damn bottles like you're going to see pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
This is a really classy looking bottle.
So the bottle, one, it's cool because it's the only Hibiki, well, I guess the older, like the 30-year-old and stuff has this too, but it goes from the white parchment to the black parchment.
Right.
It's like special made parchment Japanese paper. And then the bottle has, I think, 24 sides to represent the 24 seasons of the Japanese calendar, something like that. So yeah, it's a beautiful bottle. It's sherry and Mizunara oak cask aging.
The sherry is like right up front, man.
Yeah, this is like just honestly, the only, I wouldn't even call this a flaw because this whiskey is so incredible, but it's just low proof.
Is it 90?
It's 96.
96.
So that's the only thing that I think holds back the Hibiki brand from like sheer like stratospheric excellence, because like I think their blending ability and their ability to make like just really well finessed whiskeys is pretty much unparalleled for their higher end stuff, but it's all produced at very low proof, unfortunately.
But it's weird for you to say that because you also drink a lot of scotch, and 96 for a scotch is actually pretty high.
Yeah, but I think blends are just a little softer anyway.
Oh, so you're doing the difference between a single malt and a blend.
Yeah.
Too. Okay.
And again, even for scotch, I really want like 46%.
I feel like Japanese whiskey in some ways too is a little bit lighter in body than most scotches anyway. We've talked about it with the Mizunara oak. I think a lot of times you get a creaminess to it that sort of softens up the palate a little bit. But I'm excited about this because I know we've tried the 17 on here before, but we haven't tried the 21.
That's true. All right. So I'll have to see. Maybe, I don't know. Do I have on my soundboard? Because last year for the
we had
awards
the
ceremony,
clapping.
I had the clapping and like, I think a drum roll thing. So let's see if I have this installed. Wrong one.
Nope, that's not good.
There it is. Okay.
We found it. We found it.
So we're all set up. Okay. So our first category was the best budget whiskey. And we put a $50 price point on this. So I think last year we had it separated into like Scotch and bourbon and everything, but we didn't try quite as many whiskeys this year. So there's 2 less categories. So we just had best budget whiskey. Under $50 are 3 nominees. So James and I each nominated 2 or 3 whiskeys, and then we consolidated those as to the ones that lined up. So a couple of these categories have 4, where James and I both posited like 2 different ones, and some of them only have 3 where one of ours overlapped. And then we discussed from there which one we thought should win or, not. So best budget, the top three were the Glendronach 12-year-old single malt Scotch, which is about $50. It's prices vary all over the place. There's a couple stores I've seen it as high as 70, and there's stores I've seen it as low as 50. So, but
this was a conversation we got into last year on this too. Like, budget's hard because some of these, the MSRP is not what you're going to find on the shelf.
Right.
Some of them vary considerably. So we did our best to pick ones that we thought, based off of what they should be, these would be your budget ones.
And as far as the scotches we tasted this year, there weren't that many to choose from at the budget price point.
There was not, no.
So that was our, that one's in there. Then Weller Antique 107. Again, the MSRP price point is $40. But again, most people who get that whiskey are probably buying it from someone that's flipping it. Although whoever's flipping it to them did get it at MSRP at some point. So someone out there is getting an MSRP, but it's very hard to find. And then Wild Turkey 101, which is like $22.
Right. And again, I think it depends too on what you mean by budget, right? Like for some people, budget means this is something I'm going to throw in a cocktail.
Right.
Like it's something I'm going to keep on my shelf and it's kind of my go-to. For other people, a budget one means like value, but that's not really what we're talking about. We have a different category that's value.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, I think, dictated the direction we went on this.
Our winner for best budget bourbon under $50, Wild Turkey 101.
And the crowd goes wild. I think that's a good pick, and for a couple reasons. One, it's readily available.
Yes.
And so if you're looking for something, and that's what, to me, a budget means. It's like, this is a cheaper product or less expensive product that I can readily find and I can go back to. 101 is so versatile. You can use it in a cocktail at 101 proof. It's going to stand up to pretty much anything you do to it. You can drink it neat. Like if I go to a bar and I want whiskey and they don't have a good lineup, I always get 101.
Yeah.
And I just think it's one of those where even if you've had a lot of bourbon, you have to admit that that's a really good bottle for the price. You're looking at what, $25?
Yeah.
For a 101, and that's ridiculous.
And they have a nicer bottle now.
I
just bought a bottle of it recently to make Christmas cocktails.
Oh, nice.
And like apple cider kind of cocktails. And the bottle's really nice now. So it feels more
better.
premium.
Yeah. But I think that's a good choice. So last year, I think the winner was what, OGD 114?
Correct. It was Old Grandad 114. And this year is joined by Wild Turkey 101.
Yep. And I think, honestly, those two are similar to me in terms of quality. So I think we're being pretty consistent in the category. And I've started to, I sort of have a little bit of a crush on Wild Turkey recently, which you'll see come out in some of my picks. I just think it drinks really, really nice, especially at the price points that they put stuff out there. So 101 was kind of it jumped out right away.
Yeah, I would say Wild Turkey is probably the only brand where I like their more affordable stuff better than their really premium stuff. In the sense that like I've had the Master's Keep a couple of times, and I'm just like it's so ridiculous that anybody pays $150 or $200 for this whiskey, but all their stuff in the like $20 to $60 range, like their standard to their, flagship whiskeys, but not their ultra premium stuff, is like all great.
Yeah, it's really good. They're all their small batch stuff.
Yep.
Is really tasty.
Not as tasty as the Sabiki 21.
No, this is ridiculous. This is really good. It's
oh, dude, it's just raisins and milk chocolate, and
the nose is like,
flowers.
It's very sweet and decadent.
Like I could just do a whole hour-long episode just about this.
It's really good. And what's
huffing it.
It amazes me whenever we drink, a 20, 25 year malt whiskey, they never taste over oaked at in this age range. I'm used to drinking, if you have an 18-year-old bourbon, the odds are it's going to be like licking a barrel. This is just entirely different. This is still delicate despite the age and despite the sherry. And man, can you pick up the Mizunara in this? Can you tell the influence of the Mizunara? Because I get mostly the sherry influence.
I don't know. I mean, I would have to be able to taste it with and without Mizunara cask, like, to know. The way what I've always heard described, like, the Mizunara flavor is it kind of like a sandalwood type of flavor, compared to, like, it's less vanilla and less vanilla than American oak, less spice than European oak. And it's more of a meat. It's like kind of in between the two in terms of how tannic it is, or something like that.
Yeah,
so
it makes sense. I mean, to me, it really changes the mouthfeel. And this is obviously a 96 proof. It's lower, but it's also it coats your mouth, but it's also very soft.
Yeah, I think it's got enough weight to it. The finish goes on quite a while despite the low proof.
Yeah, it's good. That's good stuff.
It is.
How much are we talking for a bottle of this crap?
So when I bought it, it was $350.
Nice.
And it's like $1,200 or $1,500.
That's kind of what I figured.
Secondary.
Yeah, you get into those ranges. This age category and rarity, like,
I'll be honest, when I opened this on my wedding day to share with my groomsmen, I had not checked how much the price had gone up.
So you're like, oh, damn it.
And I honestly, as much as I never buy whiskey to flip it or anything, I probably wouldn't have opened it. So, best bourbon, James.
This was tough.
This was hard.
I felt like we had, for the budget, it was a little bit easier because we didn't have too many budget whiskeys that we did. And in all honesty, we don't cover a lot of budget products on here. So there was 4 or 5 that we were sort of deciding between. Bourbon was tough because we tried a wide range of bourbons, from craft to big producers to young and old, and price points were all over the place. This was one it took me a while to sort of zero in on.
Yeah, so I think the thing for me that made best bourbon tricky is because there's a wide disparity of, like, flavor profiles and ages. And so, like, for me, like, if I'm tasting like a craft bourbon, I'm kind of looking for different qualities in it than I am when I'm trying a bourbon from a big brand.
Right.
And so it's hard because our show, like, especially season 1, we did a lot more craft whiskeys. I felt like that one was actually probably a little easier to pick.
It was more apples to apples.
Because it was more apples to apples.
Yeah.
And I feel like this season we basically tried like 20 craft bourbons and 20 big brand bourbons. And so it just made it a little harder to narrow it down to one. However, our contestants, the top 4 for best bourbon, were Jack Daniel's 10-year-old, which unfortunately is pretty rare.
It is. Yeah. But that's a damn tasty pour.
But it was very...
It's a damn tasty
It was
pour.
the best Jack Daniel's product I've ever had. Yeah. And like you might be thinking like, oh, well, that's not saying that much, because like Jack Daniel's isn't that great. But again, I argue that you're probably just thinking of the standard Jack Daniel's. I think Wild Turkey and Jack Daniel's both fall in a similar vein of, a lot of times people will think of it just because they have an affordable bottle. They'll think of it as like, oh, that's just a mixer bourbon. But they make
They make good stuff.
They make good stuff.
Yeah.
So we had the Jack Daniel's 10. We had Old Weller Antique 107 in this one also. Mostly, and I think this one could have been interchangeable with the Weller Barrel Proof, because we discussed on that episode which we thought was better, and we kind of liked them both equally, but for slightly different reasons. They're very similar whiskeys.
Yeah, and I thought the full proof was just, it's a little bit extra, and so I didn't know that it was worth the jump Right. And we also had a single barrel or a store select of the OWA that was even better than the standard that I have at home. So yeah, I felt like it was a good fit here.
And I felt like it kind of stood out being a wheated whiskey. It's a little unfair, but it kind of helps it stand out from the pack because flavor profile wise,
it's just different.
It sticks out in your mind a little more. If you try 40 bourbons that all have similar mash bills and 4 of them are wheated, the wheated ones are gonna stick out a little more.
Yeah.
So, and then we had the J. Henry limited edition 19 and 21, which I think were basically interchangeable. They were slightly different profiles because it had a little bit of older stock in the 21.
Yep.
But those were both up there along with the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit.
There's my Wild Turkey coming back. See, I told you were going to get more of those, and they'll pop up more and more as we go through it. But I think this is a good group. I mean, you have a craft whiskey in here. You have a lot of big players then with Buffalo Trace, Jack Daniels, and Wild Turkey. But I would argue that the ones that we have from those distilleries are very distinctive.
Yeah.
I think to me, Kentucky Spirit is vastly different than Russell's Reserve. It's kind of the next, it's kind of like premium 101. Mm-hmm. And then you look at something like JD10, which is an entirely different flavor profile than what I get from most Jack Daniels.
Yeah. So if I remember our Russell's Reserve and our Wild Turkey Shootout episode correctly, my feeling was that the Russell's Reserve felt a little more rustic than
it is, yeah.
And it had a little more of like something I want to drink when I'm out camping kind of style. And the Kentucky Spirit was just like almost sublime. Like
it's very bright. It's very creamy.
It was just like everything I want.
Yeah.
Like I think I rescinded my statement that I thought Michter's 10 was the perfect bourbon.
Yeah, because my argument was that the Kentucky Spirit was maybe.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this was the first time I had tried it in a long time. And so it really stood out to me as, wow, this is a damn good product. Russell's Reserve leans very much cherry and kind of heavier. The Wild Turkey the Kentucky Spirit leans a little bit more bright and creamy.
Yeah.
But damn, is it a good bourbon?
It was very good. And then the J. Henry limited editions, they were just really special. So our winner, James, best bourbon of 2022, season 2, Whiskey Uncut, J. Henry limited edition 21.
Nice. Are you going to hit the little applause thing there? There we go. Nice. It's just a damn good bottle. I talked to him about it. I went and talked to Joe Henry about it. Both of those are outstanding. But I think they get a little bit better every single year. And, some of it is they're getting older stock, like you mentioned. There's 10, 11-year product that's starting to come into some of these blends. But part of it, too, is, they're just figuring stuff out as they go. They're getting a little bit more consistent with their products. They're doing probably a better job of picking barrels and identifying barrels. And they're really zoning in on the flavor profiles they want. And each one, to me, has gotten progressively better. I have not tried the 2022 yet, but the 2021 was outstanding.
Yeah, I would, if you have access to J. Henry, they're in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, they're in Dane, Wisconsin, which is right around Madison.
I enjoyed that as much as any allocated bourbon I've had, but basically if J. Henry was producing at the scale of someone like Buffalo Trace, those limited editions would 100% be allocated, selling for way more than maybe they already are. I don't know if they have a secondary market or not.
I don't know. I'm not in that game, but I do know that these sell out really quickly. So they always release them on Black Friday.
Okay.
And there's lines of people out waiting for it.
Yeah.
And I think they ask 120, 130 a pop for it.
Yeah,
that's like that.
But totally worth it. So if you're ever in Dane, Wisconsin, you just happen to be there.
You're just passing through
on Black Friday. Go get some of the J. Henry limited edition because it's really, really excellent.
And it's very distinctive too because they use an heirloom variety of red corn that was developed in Wisconsin. It gives it a very earthy kind of almost like a cornmealy kind of flavor to it, and it's just different. Like,
Yeah,
it's a 4-grain bourbon, so it's different anyway. But that red corn really makes it stand out.
And I would say the thing that, the red corn, to me, it tasted like, and again, I mean, this isn't a real tasting note, but the way like I feel like I think about what a micro distillery or what a craft distilled product tastes like. It tasted like that, but in all the best ways and none of the bad ways. Like in terms of it just having a really unique character to it and everything, but it was all really good. It didn't have any of the downsides of it tasting immature or harsh or, anything like that. It was just excellent, perfect.
Very well blended.
Now we have finished the Hibiki 21.
Yeah, we're moving on to another one here.
So we are now pouring for ourselves Highland Park Gulf Coast Edition single cask series. So this is a first fill European oak sherry butt, 11 years old. And for James, it is 130.6 proof.
There we go.
Yeah.
I like it.
31.6.
Have you ever had a scotch that high proof?
I think this is the highest proof scotch I've ever had.
Because we talked about how you said that fundamentally you don't think a scotch could ever get to
70
to hazmat, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
It has to be about as close as you can get.
I think this is basically like the proof they put it in the barrel at,
And this is interesting too, because, we just talked about how, when people think of Wild Turkey or Jack Daniels, they think of sort of the basic kind of bourbon. I kind of feel the same way about Highland Park.
Yeah.
Like when I hear Highland Park, I'm like,
okay. So here's what happened to Highland Park. Highland Park is owned by the Edrington Group, which also owns Macallan. And Highland Park, for a long while, and I would say Macallan too, were considered like the two of the best single malt Scotch whiskeys that you could get in terms of the brands. And Highland Park would consistently win awards every year, especially the Highland Park 25-year-old and the 40-year-old as like best single malt in the world, at various competitions. What ended up happening though is Highland Park, and I don't know if this was after they were purchased by Edrington or just as the whiskey boom started to come up, their prices started to skyrocket, just like Macallan did. And then and I don't know if it's like the same marketing department that Macallan has. There must be overlap, because what you saw was Macallan went from having like a standard range of whiskeys, and then they would release like high-end special editions, to now it's like every other week Macallan is coming out with like limited special edition photographer series, limited special edition, the house series, limited special edition, like our backyard series, right. Like whatever. And all of Macallan's stuff is based around like the Macallan estate. And it's all like, oh, the estate, this particular shed on the estate, we made a whiskey based on that. Like, what does that even mean? Nobody knows. But people buy it, right? And Highland Park was like, well, we technically have Viking heritage because it's the most northern distillery in Scotland, in Orkney. And so we're going to dress all of our whiskeys to look like Norse mythology and Viking. And it was just like, at that point, their quality went downhill. The prices went up. And they just had super cheesy marketing all over everything.
Yeah, because I never think of, you could have me list a ton of premium Scotch and I would never list Highland Park on there.
Yeah.
But the nose on this is like, wow.
Yeah, dude, it's intense. So
it's a lot of sherry.
But
it's almost sherry to the point of butterscotchy, right?
Yeah. It's very nutty, very like dense.
Man.
It's like dank with sherry.
It's dank with sherry. We've talked about so there's just a few bottles that as soon as you pour it, you can walk past somebody and you can smell it out of their damn Glencairn glass. This is one of those. It's extremely aromatic. We're going to try some Two Souls stuff next week, which, by the way, I should say we left all Two Souls stuff off.
Because it would have won.
Because I'm very biased. But we're going to cover some of our winter release stuff next time. And one of those, it just pops out of the glass at you. And it sort of reminds me of this. Yeah. It's just so aromatic.
So this to me is this, even other cast strength scotches that I have, notwithstanding, this bottle is the closest I have found bottled to like tasting what I got to try in Scotland straight out of the barrel.
God damn, that's good.
Dude, it's really good.
Wow.
It's
that
like
is so rich, and it makes me want to drink more scotch at this proof.
Yeah.
Wow.
And here's the thing. It's 11 years old. And then, you know, this kind of goes back to our young whiskey episode where I said, like, my favorite age for Scotch whiskey is either it needs to be, like, old. It needs to be, like, 18 plus years, because then you just get interesting, like, nuance.
And it rounds out and it gets
bigger. Or it needs to be, like, cast strength and, like, 8 to 10 years old. And it's, like, there's just, like, this magical point around that age where, and this is slightly peated, which helps it too.
But you really can't tell, or at least I can't.
I get it more on the mouthfeel. I don't really smell it much. The proof covers a lot of it.
Well, and so does the sherry.
Yes,
but it does make a nice blend.
But it's only like 10 to 15 parts per million.
Yeah,
so it's like
it's pretty small.
A third of what Lafroig or something would be.
Thank God.
But yeah, dude,
that's delicious.
That's a delicious bottle.
I'm going to sip on this while we talk about our next category,
which is the best rye.
Again, this was one that was a little bit more difficult this year because I didn't even realize this, but we didn't talk about a ton of rye. So I'm going to have to step up my rye game a little bit.
I felt like we did. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay,
there's
maybe
not that
not.
many.
Yeah, I guess there weren't.
Compared to bourbon, there wasn't really.
Yeah,
that
I guess
many.
there weren't. You know what? The reason why I felt like there were a lot of ryes this year is because I liked almost every single one of them.
That's true.
Like
that's true.
So to me, like in my, retrospect of like going back through the season in my head, I was like, we tried a lot of rye this year because like
it was all memorable.
It was all, at least it all surprised me how good it was.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but most of it. So our 3 contenders were the Jack Daniel's single barrel rye, tasted at Jigs Liquors, the Traverse City barrel proof rye, which you brought back. Now, did they send you that?
They sent us that for the podcast, yeah.
So thank you to those guys for sending us that, although that did not factor into our opinion.
No.
And then the New Riff Balboa rye were the top 3.
3 really good bottles here. And I will say, just up front, the JD single barrel rye, and this is the cast strength, there's a ton of variability in bottles here. And so I've had some that literally are one of my top 5 ryes I've ever had. And I've had others that are good, but not great. So we had to kind of go by what we tried on this. I think there's a lot of range, though, in that. So I wouldn't argue with anybody if you have a bottle of that and it was just outstanding and you think it's one of the better ryes you've had. I agree with you. It probably is. We're just going by what we tasted on the show.
And I think it didn't help that particular episode, we also tried the Jack Daniel's 10-year-old bourbon. And so I think that one's maybe slightly overshadowed the rye. But I also remember being, more impressed than I thought I would by the Jack Daniel's, their standard rye.
Yeah.
Like was, and as far as like, if we had a separate affordable rye category, I would probably put that in contention. Because it's very affordable, but it was pretty good. So, and then the Traverse City, we actually just tasted again right before the show because I had siphoned off a little bit from your bottle when you had it here.
Yeah, you liked this one.
I liked that one a lot. I thought it was not very like rye-like though to me. Like the spice was pretty tamed on it, relatively speaking, especially for the proof because I think it was like 54% or 55%.
Yeah, somewhere around there. I know it's in the 110 range.
Yeah, but I felt like the spice was a little restrained on that one.
Which is probably why you liked it.
That's probably why I liked it.
Yeah, you tend to like the ones that are a little bit softer, maybe a little less rye.
Just a little softer, yeah. Compared to something like, what did I drink the other night? The
like Whistle Pig.
No, the Willet, like their 3-year-old.
Man. Willet, like 3-4-year-old, 6-year-old.
It's just straight up cinnamon red hot in a glass.
In the face.
It is like someone took Red Hots, poured them out of the bag, put them on the stove, melted them into a syrup, and then like poured it in your bottle.
Have you ever had any of like old like green wax top Willet 4 years and 6 years?
No.
Oh man, back in the day, again, we always talk about what we could find 10, 15 years ago. you could go into pretty much any store and you could get a sexy ass Willet 4-year with like this, with the green wax on it. And that was like, if you took Red Hots and soaked them in pickle juice, like that's exactly what it tasted like. I haven't had any of the new stuff, but you're right. That's a big rye. The ones that we have on this list do not fall into that category.
No. And then the last one on the list was the New Riff Balboa rye, which I was enjoyed very much.
You like this one a lot. It's a very different flavor profile for a rye. It's almost on the floral end. Mm-hmm. The Balboa rye is an heirloom variety, so just a very different flavor profile. Even for like, because we did a whole show on New Riff.
Yeah.
And this tasted nothing like the other rye that we tried.
Yeah. So the winner of Best Rye was the New Riff Balboa rye.
Not surprising. This was one of the better bottles that I think I tried this year.
Yeah, actually, so when I put this list together, if the price point, if it had been like $10 cheaper, it would have appeared in, I think, like 4 out of our 6 categories. Which,
yeah, this is one you really dug.
Which I think last year, the one that happened with was Watershed.
Oh, the Watershed single barrel.
Single barrel. Last year, Watershed was in like
every category.
5 out of our 8 categories of like best bourbon, most memorable, best value, like everything. So that seems to be like a pretty good indicator of when it should win a category. Is when it's in like every category. Yeah.
And the Balboa is a special bottle. I mean, they also have a malted rye that I think is 6 or 8 years, I can't remember, that has a similar flavor profile, but there's just something about that Balboa that really stands out. And I knew as soon as I bought that, or I think Chad actually bought it and brought it back for me. As soon as we cracked that, I knew it would be one that you liked.
It has everything that I want out of a rye whiskey, and I need to find a bottle of it for myself at some point. So if anyone listening has a hookup, let me know. It's 100 proof, which, I argue is about the perfect proof, unless you're going to present something at cask strength. I think 100 proof, every whiskey works at 100 proof. There's some whiskeys that work under it or above it, but every whiskey works at 100 proof. But the nuance of the flavor, the added little elements of uniqueness that you get from that Balboa heirloom variety of the rye, and it having 5% or 10% malted rye in there also, is just like, it's just like that little, it's like the icing on top that when you try a lot of whiskey, it adds up, and those are the things that make something stand out. So I think it's a well-deserved win. Although I do want to say the Jack Daniel's single barrel rye was very good.
Yes. And as was the Traverse City. I think this was a really tight category.
It was.
We both had Balboa at the top coming in when we talked about it. But I thought about it a little bit because, like I said, I've had some of the Jack Daniel's single barrel ryes that are just like game changers.
Yeah.
And there was a couple in particular, Andrew Sims, that came on a few times, hoarded a couple bottles. There were a particular barrel or batch that he really, really liked. And they were, really, really good.
Oh, the Jack Daniels?
Yeah. But there's just so much variability. I had one that was, to me, a little bit over oaked. And the one we had I thought was good, but it wasn't up to the level of the one that he was kind of tucking away. Probably because he had them all, so I wasn't able to snag any.
Yeah. And I think the only reason it edged out Traverse City was price point. It's a little bit cheaper. The Traverse City, I think, appealed slightly more to me than you, because again, it was a little more on the softer rye side.
And honestly, if people are going to run into a bottle too, you're much more likely to run into the JD rye than you are Traverse City, because again, with craft, distribution's always a problem.
All right, the next category, best single malt / international. So I combined this into one category for a couple reasons. We didn't do like a Japanese episode this year. We didn't do like an Irish whiskey episode this year. So we technically did, because we did all the spot whiskeys. We did the blue spot, green spot, yellow spot, red spot. But we didn't branch out as far into like Asian whiskeys, Irish whiskeys. We had like one Polish whiskey. But all that said, it's kind of hard to, to balance out the category with like bourbon and everything. They kind of fell into the same category. And if we only have best Irish, like if we listed Irish and Scotch separately, the Irish would all be from the same brand.
We'd have like 4 bottles, and
Right.
all end with the word spot.
And most international whiskey is malt whiskey. So I think it just kind of goes well as a fitted category. Whether it's single malt or not, like Irish whiskey is malt whiskey primarily, but it might have a little bit of grain whiskey blended in there. So the best single malt / international, we had the Blue Spot Irish whiskey. We had the Macallan 21-year-old. We had the Glengoyne 18-year-old. So those were the 3 in contention. Now, the Macallan 21, I have to say, was, for me, the best whiskey I tasted on the show this year.
Yeah, I would agree.
However, it's discontinued like 4 years ago or something. And, if you want to buy a bottle, it's like $1,700 secondary market.
But if you run into one...
Yeah.
It's a gimme.
Yeah.
I agree. In terms of Scotch, it's one of the better ones we've had.
Yeah. I can't possibly ever recommend something that's like totally unattainable. It basically doesn't exist, and it's absurdly expensive. Like, at least with Weller, it's like, it's hard to get, but if you do get it, it's like $40 best case and like $200 worst case.
Yeah, you can find it.
And like, even if you're paying secondary, you're overpaying, but you're not like missing multiple mortgage payments.
Right.
So
you don't have to skip car payments or anything like that for it.
Yeah. So although the Macallan 21 is very good, it's a honorable mention, let's say. So then we had Blue Spot and Glengoyne 18-year-old. So the winner of best single malt / international whiskey is the Glengoyne 18-year-old.
This one surprised me a little bit because, thinking back to the Glengoyne show, which was just a couple ago, man, that 18 was just so good. And I wrote down, when we were kind of going through this, I wrote down 18/25 because I thought they were pretty similar. But the price point between the 18 and the 25 didn't make any sense to me. Like, I thought the 18 was just as good, maybe a little bit different, but it was just as good for a lot less.
So to me, I disagree. I think the 25-year-old is better, but I like different things in whiskey than you. And this is the same reason why the Glengoyne 18 got on this spot instead of the Glendronach 18-year-old, which we tried way back at the beginning of the season with Andrew when he was on the show. When we tried the Glendronach 8, if you haven't had Glendronach 18, depending on the year of the bottle that you get, the age is a misnomer because the distillery was closed for a while. And so like the bottle of Glendronach 18 I have is actually like 22 years old. It's not 18 years old. That being said, though, Glendronach's style, the particular sherry casks that they use are so incredibly intense. And I gave you a sample of that 18-year-old once like a year and a half ago even. And you were like, this is just sherry. Like, there's nothing else here. And that was the same comment you made about the Glengoyne 25-year-old.
Right, yeah. It was just a sherry bomb.
It's just, and not even a sherry bomb. It's almost, you wouldn't know it was whiskey except for the proof. Like, the flavor is just so dominated by the sherry to the point that for many people, even within the Scotch community, many people consider it way like out of balance, And so to me, the Glengoyne 18 represented, one, it still tasted like whiskey. You could still get some of the malt flavors, some of the barrel notes outside of the sherry, although it is still a sherry bomb for sure. Like, don't get us wrong. It's still a lot of sherry. But also the price point on that one was like $150 versus, $400, $500 for the 25. Which the 25 you do get more proof, more age, but you're talking like maybe a 5% increase in quality for triple the money.
Yeah.
So I think the Glengoyne 18 is well earned of the winning spot. Although Blue Spot, I have to say,
That was tough.
Blue Spot is the one that I am more interested in finding a bottle of. Now, it's also because it's way harder to find.
Well, and they came out with the Gold Spot now too, which we have to.
Which I have,
try.
yeah, I know, and I haven't tried that one. I haven't seen it.
I've seen it, but I haven't tried it.
How much is it?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, if you see it, buy it. We have some podcast funds, and we can do an episode.
Just drop whatever.
Well, not whatever. Text me.
Couple grand.
Yeah, we do not have that many patrons.
I'm gonna look it up here.
We have very nice patrons, but we don't have that many of them. Yeah, so Glengoyne 18. Second to last category.
Most memorable.
Most memorable. Now, I feel like it's whiskey. It shall be whiskey uncut tradition that one of the most memorable whiskeys mentioned shall be the worst whiskey of the season.
There was a really bad one we tried.
Yeah, which is obviously the Whistle Pig pig smoke crap whiskey, which is that's how I listed
what's
it.
the actual name of it?
It's Smokestack.
Smokestack,
I
yeah.
think.
Because I was thinking Smokestack, but I know they did the farm stock twist.
Right. I think it was Smokestack or Smokestock, and I called it Smoke Crap or something.
And it's a bourbon, right? Or was it a rye?
Honestly, I don't care. It was bad.
I'm gonna look it up.
It was a bourbon, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so we tried that at the Beyond Bourbon event. It is not like peated bourbon. It is straight up like they use artificial liquid smoke stuff and pump smoke into it, and it tastes terrible. Now, it does not taste as bad.
It's a rye. It says it's a rye whiskey.
Is it rye?
That's what it says. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get past the taste of the horrible artificial smoke, so to determine. Now, it is not as bad as whatever that horrible single malt whiskey.
Defiant?
The Defiant single malt. That's
That
what
was
it
really, really bad.
That was really bad. That's the only whiskey I've ever given the tasting note ass. But I can only imagine that is the most similar flavor to what I was tasting. So it is not as bad, but it's up there.
It was pretty. The thing about it was really, really rough. Like, if you set something on fire and inhaled it, like that's sort of what it tastes like. And I get what you mean. Like, I sometimes talk about rums, the difference between a true barrel vanilla flavor and a vanilla extract flavor. Right. That's what this tasted like. It didn't taste like you smoked the grain.
No.
It just tasted like there was liquid smoke in it. It was not a light-handed
It's like when you have an orange Skittle and they're like, this tastes like orange. And it's like, it does taste like the color orange. That's accurate.
But I don't know if it tastes like an
but it
actual
doesn't taste like
orange.
an actual orange.
Yeah.
So anyway, that one's on there. Did not win.
No. Although I will say I won't forget it.
No, I won't forget it. I'd like to, but but the actual 4 spots of most memorable whiskeys for real whiskeys.
For real whiskeys.
Although one of these
we're not making any Whistle Pig fans.
Although
right now.
One of these still isn't a real whiskey is the Old Forester 1915.
So I had to put this on the list.
Yes.
Because we did the whole like 1910 equal parts, 1910, 1920.
Yep.
And we both agreed that it was better, we thought, than 1910 or 1920 individually. And very rarely do we do things like that on the show, or have I tried things like Poor Man's Pappy.
It's never better.
It's never better. It's always just kind of crappy, and it feels sort of manufactured.
Right.
This was actually better, and so I thought it had to be on the list for most memorable, because I've even gone on like Gainesville Whiskey Club and a couple other groups, and I've recommended, hey, try this because it actually works, and I like it.
Yeah, so if you like Old Forester products, if you have the 1910 and the 1920, and we actually sent out, so the tasting kit that I sent out to Taylor Lauren for Christmas included the 1910, the 1920, and the 1915. So I made her a little batch of the 1915 for the tasting kit. So
has she reached out and told us what she thinks? We need to get in touch with Taylor Lauren.
Well, she did reach out and say thank you.
Oh, okay, good.
Because it came in a special Christmas box and
that's nice.
Everything. Mm-hmm. But no, I'll find out what she thought about that.
Yeah.
But the 1915 is just equal parts 1910, 1920, and it balances out the sweetness and the slight harshness of the 1920, and just it works really well. Then we also had Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye, which again was really memorable for me as one of my favorite rye whiskeys. And I would have probably put New Riff Balboa Rye on here also, but I had already given it best rye in my category. And, I try to spread the love a little bit.
At least a little.
Because it also, it had showed up multiple other places. But I think that was probably maybe your top rye or one of your top two ryes. So those were both really memorable as far as, one, it shocked me how much I liked the Jack Daniel's product, and it shocked me how good it was just in general. Like, it was just an excellent whiskey. And then Blue Spot Irish whiskey, cask strength, that is the bomb. If you like Irish whiskey,
it doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
No. Like, I always had Redbreast 12 cask strength as like my gold standard of enthusiast Irish whiskey, because I think there's some Irish whiskeys that are maybe better from the perspective of like nuance or complexity or whatever, but they're always all like 80 proof or 86 proof at the max, right? Because Irish whiskey has the same problem Scotch does, of it all being super low proof. But the Redbreast 12-year cask strength has for years been like, talk to anyone who's a whiskey enthusiast at all, and they're like, that's the best Irish whiskey you can get. Blue Spot is like the best Irish whiskey you can get.
Yeah, it changed my view of what the best Irish whiskey was. And Redbreast 12 I really, really like, but I didn't feel like it had as many flavor layers as what the Blue Spot does. It was just, Blue Spot's a different beast.
And the only downside to it is the price. And I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by a 7-year-old whiskey that costs $150.
Right, yeah.
And now I think some places have it listed at like 110, 120, and that's probably like the best you're going to see it. But yeah, it is very up there. And then the final one for most memorable was Kentucky Spirit. And again, that's, for me, I put Kentucky Spirit on the list because it supplanted in my mind what a perfect bourbon, what I consider the perfect bourbon. And so, I'd always said Michter's 10 was the perfect bourbon, and James always laughed at me because he was like, he's like, yeah, if by perfect you mean boring and expensive and like nobody's actually that excited to drink it. And I was like, well, but in my mind, the perfect bourbon was just the essence of the flavors of bourbon, not necessarily like the best bourbon. But Kentucky Spirit takes that formula of what I think the perfect bourbon is, of, it represents all those like traditional characters of bourbon, except it's also really good.
Yeah. And I think for me, the reason I put it on the list was it had been a long time since I had tried Kentucky Spirit. 8-9 years ago, we did a Kentucky Spirit pick with one of the groups I was in. You could find it fairly readily around. And I remember having it and liking it and thinking it was probably my favorite wild turkey product. But it sort of disappeared between then and now. And you can't really find it. And so to be able to have one again and sit down and be like, man, it's really good. And I think that's why I put it on most memorable, because kind of in the way that Blue Spot sort of changed our opinion of what, maybe the best or ideal Irish whiskey is. I felt like Kentucky Spirit sort of did that for me this year.
Yeah, and especially for me, as far as like what a wild turkey product could be, I was gobsmacked, because again, Wild Turkey is one of those brands that you see on the shelf all the time and you forget, you just think of like, oh, it's regular whiskey. That's like whiskey for regular people, not for like whiskey enthusiasts, and it's right. And now I am like so sad that for so many years I saw Kentucky Spirit sitting on the shelf and just didn't buy it.
Especially the old like bottle that had like, it was sort of designed after like turkey feathers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it had that. They used to have this
Dude, you
really
are ancient.
cool bottle.
I've never seen that.
You've
bottle
never seen that
before.
one?
No.
Oh man, I'll look up a photo while we're going over. But that was awesome. The new bottle is fine, but
Yeah.
the old bottle, man, that was special.
But like, I just remember I would see it just sitting on the shelf, by the dozens for a while, and I was like, Wild Turkey, like, there's nothing special there, but there is. So, don't ever let yourself don't ever fall into that trap. Is what I'm trying to say.
We're not English majors on this show. So there's the old bottle.
Huh? That looks like the King Henry VIII cognac bottle.
Yeah, I think it was probably too expensive for them to do, and whatever. But it was a really cool bottle.
That's cool.
Yeah,
yeah. The Kentucky Spirit, definitely a good one. So winner, most memorable, is for 2022 Blue Spot Irish Whiskey.
Yay for Blue Spot. And there's Gold Spot now. We have to try too. I think they're kind of a similar price. I think they're both in the 120 range.
Yep.
Something like that. So I'm really curious to try that. I've heard some good reports of it. But certainly I think out of the Irish whiskey I've had in the last 5-10 years, Blue Spot is the best I've had.
Yeah, and you texted me when you saw the bottle, and you're like, "Do we have funds to get it?" And I was like, "Yeah, we do." And you got it. We brought it. We tasted it, and I hung on to it for a little bit with the intent to shoot a video for Malt Mondays about it against Redbreast 12 cast strength, and I didn't have enough Redbreast 12 cast strength left to actually do a video. I had like half of a pour left. And so I never ended up shooting the video. And then I gave it back to you. And
you never got it back.
Yeah, I need to get it back because I don't know how much of it you drunk, but
not too much. It's funny because
I'm the same way. I don't drink.
I don't drink that much.
Yeah.
And right now too, I'm trying to pick barrels for Two Souls, and so when I do drink, it's mostly like picking stuff for that.
work.
Yeah, and it's really hard work. It's really, but I don't get around to pulling a lot of bottles off my shelves anymore. So there's plenty there. I'm happy to share.
But I will say that is like, as far as bottles that we view that are purchased for the show in particular, or being sent by a rep or anything, that is probably the single bottle that I like desire the most to to go find one, because it's not impossible to find. It's not like allocated bourbon, but it is harder to find just because there's less availability of it. Most stores don't stock premium Irish whiskey, unfortunately.
And there's not too many cast strength Irish whiskeys out there,
right?
So it's different.
For an educational show, I feel like we don't do a very good job educating ourselves.
We
sometimes.
probably don't.
But yeah. So anyway, congratulations to Spot Unlimited Incorporated, whatever
whoever they are.
Brand is. I think they're owned by Jameson. So good job, Jameson.
Yeah, it's the umbrella company, right?
Yeah. But anyway, I am just in time for our final category. And this is as excited as I was because I've like basically never opened and tasted my Hibiki 21-year-old. As excited as I was for that, James brought something potentially even rarer and more elusive,
or at least probably buzzier, right?
Well, yes, yeah.
So this is the 2018 George T. Stagg. I know.
I'm hugging. For those of you not watching the video, I'm legitimately like hugging and stroking the bottle.
I may have to disinfect this bottle before we leave. But this is so I have like 3 or 4 bottles of Stagg. I think I've gone on here before and said the 2014 is by far my favorite, but the 2018 is legit. This is 129.4 proof. I think it's a good representation of what Stagg is. And I know you've only had Stagg a handful of times, right?
So the first time I tried Stagg was the 2014.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
a bad place to start.
Which I believe is the king daddy of all Stagg. Basically.
2012 and 2014 for me are way up there on the list. But this is, I mean, in terms of bourbon, this is, I've said numerous times, to me, this is the pinnacle of bourbon. It doesn't get a whole lot better than Stagg, or if it gets any better. than Stag, in my opinion. There's a reason why people go after it. It's, I don't know. In my opinion, it's as good as it gets in bourbon. And the nose on this one tells you right away.
It is so good. Like, it has everything you could ever want in a bourbon. Like, there's brown sugar, there's vanilla, there's fruits.
Yeah, there's definitely
tons
cherry.
Of cherry. There's oak in there, like, but it's not over oaked. Like,
It's oak spice. Like, there's a spiciness to it that comes from the barrels of Stag. That's just, it's different.
Dude, it's just like, it's everything. So the category that we have to go along with talking about Stag is best value bourbon,
which Stag is not. I mean, maybe if you can find it at MSRP, it's a killer, but you're not going to find it.
If you find it at $110 a bottle,
you buy all of it.
Buy all of it. But no. So best value whiskey. The contenders are the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye,
which again, if you can find one of those outstanding barrels, I think it's going to be hard to beat in this category. The one that we tried, like I said, wasn't as good as some of the ones I'd had, but man, some of them are just killer, like amazing value.
Then we had the Kentucky Spirit again,
which has showed up on every list, but it hasn't won yet. No, it's been on every list.
Yeah, it's been on 3. It's been on best bourbon, most memorable, and best value. Then we have the Glendronach 15-year-old.
And this was one of yours. This was...
Yeah, I don't think you really remembered this one because we tried it in like episode 2 or 3. But Glendronach 15 competes easily against many 18 and 20-year-old scotches as far as sherry cask scotches go. It's the Glendronach 15 Revival, 46% ABV. And it is a whiskey that you'll probably typically see priced between $75 and $100. And at that price, it like slaughters every other sherry cask Scotch whiskey. Like, it just like decimates them. So,
because that's a pretty moderate price range, really.
It really is
for that age and sherry.
Unfortunately, because Glendronach is well known as being of really good value, if you're in an area like we are, where not many people carry or have a good Scotch selection, you'll see it marked up. So that's the danger. But for instance, like where I live, this bottle costs like $140.
Yeah,
and it's not good value at that. But it's also not terrible value at that. So like
which
that
tells you a lot.
Which tells you a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I bought a bottle at $140. Like, I didn't feel like I overpaid. And then I drove to Orlando and I found it for $75 a bottle. And then I was like, oh, I guess I overpaid, but I'm buying 3 of them. This is the only bottle. I have like 4 bottles of it on my shelf. So I can easily attest with my own wallet that like this and like Glenfarclas 25-year-old are like the best value, you know. So yeah, fantastic value for Scotch whiskey if you're looking for sherry cask Scotch. And I think the Glengoyne 15 compares pretty favorably, but it's lower proof and it's just missing that little bit of sparkle. And then the other one in our best value category was the New Riff Balboa Rye,
which has popped up numerous times as well. And yeah, you're looking at like a $60 bottle if
Correct.
you can find that in places, which, you know, given the quality of the stuff that we try on here, if you're winning best rye with a $60 bottle, that's a damn good value. Mm-hmm. There's no question. Oh, you're savoring the sip of Stag. Mm-hmm. Is that your first sip of it? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. We're going to have to take a moment and let Paul...
oh, man.
Let Paul come to
terms. It was a poorly timed sip as James stopped talking.
And I just look at you while you're in the middle of it. Yeah.
Dude, I can't feel my mouth, but it tastes so good.
Stag is so good.
It's so intense and so nuanced, like all at the same time, which I see. That's the thing I feel like that Stag has going for it that pretty much no other whiskey does. It's generally when you have a whiskey so intense as Stag, it loses all the nuance of flavors. and it just becomes like this sledgehammer that just hits you over the head with like one thing. But Stag has the ability to like hit you with a sledgehammer while like playing Bach in the background. Like,
Nice.
You know, it's like you're listening to Bach while being hit with a sledgehammer.
And you know, the first Stag I had was the 2012, which was a hazmat one. And the thing that impressed me immediately about Stag is it hits your palate really sweet, and just like a bourbon should. And then it sort of just blows up, and you get all these layers of flavor. And some of them are a little bit more, you know, vanilla and butterscotchy. Some of them are a little bit more fruity. I think this one to me leans a little bit more towards fruity, but it always ends with this like spicy barrel note that I think is just so nice. It makes you want to take another sip of it. So Stag is one of the few bottles where I completely understand why people go apeshit over it. Like, I agree. I would go apeshit over it too, and I do. I totally get it. It's one of the few that I think lives up to the hype that you hear.
Yeah. And the like literally the only problem with it is how popular it is. Like,
yeah. And in the past, like, it's always been a markup. There's no question. Stag's always been expensive, but it's also one of the higher yielding bottles of the BTAC run.
Yeah.
You know, William Weller, I think Eagle Rare 17 is always super, super low. Stag's always one of the higher yielding ones, and that's always sort of balanced out the cost. But then in 2021, Buffalo Trace decided that they didn't have any that lived up to the quality of Stag, and everything shot through the roof again.
And how old is Stag? It's usually like 15 16 years.
Yeah, 15 years is what they tell you, but you know, there's probably some variability.
Yeah. Dude, it's just so good. Like,
yeah, I mean, if you get lucky enough to get one of these any year, you win.
Anyway, so the winner of Best Value from the JD Single Barrel Rye, Kentucky Spirit, Glendronach 15, and New Riff Balboa Rye is the New Riff Balboa Rye.
So the Balboa takes two categories.
Correct.
They got best rye and they got best value. And I think that's legit. Like, it's really, you know, you and I have mentioned that I don't think either of us buy a ton anymore. Like,
No.
I probably buy more than I like to admit I do.
Well,
but I don't really buy
right.
that many bottles in a year. But I think in terms of looking back, which purchases I'm most pleased with this year, that's absolutely at the top of the list. It's just a really well done rye that I think is a little bit surprising, which for you and I, people that have been drinking whiskey for as long as we have, we're not surprised very often. And when you're surprised by a whiskey, like, it immediately makes it stand out.
Well, and I would say the other thing beyond just being surprised, like, fuck, dude, I just took another sip of that, and it's just like
I'm distracted.
I just have to stop talking to like enjoy the flavor.
You've said the F word twice now on the show.
Yeah, I know.
We're gonna get censored.
Yeah, I know, for real. So I think for me, it's very hard for me because I think I'm a little more whiskey promiscuous than James is, in terms of I tend to be more forgiving or enjoying. I tend to enjoy more whiskeys than James does. He's a little more critical than I am. Not all the time. Like the Whistle Pig Smokestack, whatever. He like tried to say nice things about it. I was just like, James, stop.
Yeah,
There's nothing
you
nice to
didn't
say.
even attempt to. Yeah.
But generally speaking, I would say I'm a little more easygoing on whiskeys than you are. I think New Riff Balboa Rye at $50 or $60 ish, whatever, MSRP. I think it just kind of blows everything else out of the water.
Yeah, it's hard to beat that.
Minus the Kentucky Spirit, because the Kentucky Spirit's also like $60.
Yeah, and that's really close. And those were the two that I sort of...
And they're both medium hard to find.
Yeah, and I sort of battled between the two, but in terms of unique quality, I think that's what makes the Balboa stand out. And so Chad and I both got a bottle. He bought 2 bottles. We brought them back. We took them on a vacation that we took as a group, and we killed one. Yeah. And I still have a little bit of mine left. And very rarely is there a bottle that I'm inclined to go back to over and over and over again?
Yeah.
That's one of them, along with the Kentucky Spirit, which is why you saw it pop up in so many categories.
Yeah.